Marcus Williams wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished loading the last box into his delivery truck. The summer heat in downtown Chicago was brutal, but he couldn't afford to complain. Every delivery meant money for groceries, rent, and his 8-year-old daughter Emma's school supplies. Being a single father wasn't easy, especially when you're working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, and since then, Marcus had been juggling his responsibilities like a circus performer. His ex-wife Sarah had moved to California with her new boyfriend, leaving Marcus to raise Emma on his own. Not that he minded. Emma was the light of his life. The reason he got up every morning with determination instead of despair. His delivery route today included the wealthy, magnificent Mile District, where glass towers stretched toward the sky and luxury cars lined the streets. Marcus had learned not to feel intimidated by the wealth around him. Rich or poor, everyone needed their packages delivered on time. The next stop on his list was the headquarters of Blackstone Industries, a massive steel and glass building that took up an entire city block. The company was owned by Victoria Blackstone, one of the youngest billionaires in America. Marcus had heard stories about her. Some called her brilliant, others called her ruthless. What everyone agreed on was that she had built her empire from scratch and didn't tolerate weakness or excuses. As Marcus pulled up to the loading dock, he noticed something unusual. A small crowd had gathered near the building's main entrance, and there seemed to be some kind of commotion. His curiosity got the better of him as he grabbed the packages for Blackstone Industries and walked toward the scene. An elderly homeless man sat on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry, please help." The man looked frail, probably in his 70s, with clothes that had seen better days and shoes with holes in them. But what caught Marcus's attention wasn't the homeless man. It was the woman standing over him, shouting in a voice that carried across the street. Victoria Blackstone herself was there, dressed in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her green eyes blazed with anger. She was pointing at the homeless man like he was some kind of criminal. "This is private property," she was saying, her voice sharp and cold. "You're making my clients uncomfortable, and you're bad for business. Security should have removed you hours ago." The homeless man looked up at her with tired eyes. "Ma'am, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just sitting here. I haven't eaten in 2 days." "That's not my problem," Victoria snapped back. "There are shelters for people like you. Go find one and stop making my building look bad." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He had seen this kind of treatment before. The way some people looked at those less fortunate as if they weren't even human beings. It reminded him of his own struggles. The times when he had been one paycheck away from losing his apartment. When he had to choose between buying Emma new shoes or paying the electric bill. The security guard, a large man in his 50s, approached the homeless man with obvious reluctance. "Come on, buddy," he said gently. "You need to move along. Where am I supposed to go?" The old man asked, struggling to stand up. His legs shook, and Marcus could see he was weak from hunger. Victoria crossed her arms impatiently. "I don't care where you go, just get away from my building. You're scaring away customers." That's when Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He set down his packages and walked over to the group, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "Is there a problem here?" Victoria turned to look at him, taking in his delivery uniform and work boots with obvious disdain. "This doesn't concern you. Move along." "Actually, it does concern me," Marcus replied, pulling out his wallet. He only had $20 left until payday, money he had been planning to use for Emma's lunch tomorrow, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He handed the 20 to the homeless man. "Here, sir. Get yourself something to eat." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, son." "God bless you." Victoria's face turned red with anger. "What do you think you're doing? You're just encouraging him to stay here and bother people." Marcus looked at her directly, not backing down despite knowing she could probably buy and sell his entire neighborhood without thinking twice about it. "I'm helping another human being. Something everyone should do when they have the chance." "Human being?" Victoria laughed coldly. "He's a vagrant, a drain on society. People like him are the reason this city has problems." "People like him?" Marcus felt his temper rising. "You mean people who are struggling? People who have fallen on hard times? Lady, you have no idea what real problems look like." The crowd around them had grown larger, with people pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. Victoria noticed the attention and seemed to become even more agitated. "Do you have any idea who I am?" she demanded. "I know exactly who you are," Marcus replied calmly. "You're someone who has forgotten that money doesn't make you better than anyone else. You're someone who thinks being successful gives you the right to treat people like garbage." Victoria stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You delivery boy nobody, you have no right to lecture me. I've built an empire worth billions. What have you accomplished?" Marcus smiled sadly. "I've raised a daughter who knows the difference between right and wrong. I've never looked at another person and decided they didn't deserve basic human dignity. That's worth more than all your money." The homeless man had quietly moved away during their argument, probably afraid of causing more trouble. But Marcus wasn't finished. "You want to know what's bad for business?" he continued. "It's not a hungry old man sitting quietly with a sign. It's showing the world that success has made you cruel. It's proving that having everything means you've lost the most important thing of all, your humanity." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, her green eyes unreadable. Then she turned to her security guard. "Get this man's information," she said coldly. "I want to know exactly who he is." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he stood his ground. "My name is Marcus Williams. I work for quick delivery services, and I'm not sorry for what I said." Without another word, Victoria turned and walked into her building, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The crowd began to disperse, and Marcus picked up his packages, his hands shaking slightly as the adrenaline wore off. He had just confronted one of the most powerful women in Chicago. He had probably just lost his delivery contract with Blackstone Industries, maybe even his job. But as he thought about Emma and the values he was trying to teach her, he knew he had done the right thing. What Marcus didn't know was that Victoria Blackstone was already making plans, and her next move would surprise everyone, including herself. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched as he finished his deliveries that afternoon. Every time he glanced in his rearview mirror, he half expected to see security guards or police cars following him. The confrontation with Victoria Blackstone kept replaying in his mind, and he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. When he finally arrived home to his small 2-bedroom apartment, Emma was already there, having walked home from her after-school program. She was sitting at their kitchen table working on her homework with the focused concentration that always made Marcus proud. "Hey, princess," he said, ruffling her curly brown hair as he set his keys on the counter. "How was school?" "Good, Dad." Emma looked up with a smile that could light up the darkest room. "Mrs. Peterson said my science project was one of the best in the class. And guess what? Tommy Martinez invited me to his birthday party next Saturday." Marcus felt a familiar pang in his chest. Tommy's family was well off, and the party would probably be at some expensive venue with expensive gifts. He had been saving for weeks just to buy Emma a decent present for her own upcoming birthday. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice cheerful. "We'll figure out a nice gift for Tommy." As Emma continued with her homework, Marcus opened his laptop to check his work emails. His heart sank when he saw a message from his supervisor at Quick Delivery Services, asking him to come in early tomorrow morning for a meeting. The subject line simply read, "Urgent, Blackstone Industries contract." Marcus barely slept that night, tossing and turning as he imagined different scenarios. Maybe Victoria Blackstone had complained about his behavior. Maybe she had demanded he be fired. Maybe she was going to sue him for some imagined offense. He thought about Emma, about their small but happy life together, about how one moment of standing up for what was right might cost them everything. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the quick delivery office 30 minutes early. The building was a modest warehouse on the south side of Chicago, nothing like the gleaming towers where he made his deliveries. His supervisor, Mike Chen, was already waiting for him with a cup of coffee and an expression Marcus couldn't read. "Marcus, sit down," Mike said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday at Blackstone Industries." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Mike, I can explain." "Oh, hold on." Mike raised his hand. "Let me finish. I got a call yesterday from Victoria Blackstone's office. They want to cancel their delivery contract with us." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. "Mike, I'm sorry. I'll take full responsibility. Don't let this hurt the company because of my actions." Mike stared at him for a moment, then broke into a grin. "Marcus, you didn't let me finish. They want to cancel their contract with us because they want to hire you directly. What? Marcus was sure he had heard wrong. Victoria Blackstone wants to offer you a job. Her assistant called and said she was impressed with your integrity and moral character. Those were her exact words. Marcus sat in stunned silence. This had to be some kind of joke, or worse, some kind of trap. Are you sure this isn't some kind of setup? He asked. She was furious with me yesterday. Mike shrugged. I don't know what to tell you, man. All I know is that they want you to come in for an interview this afternoon. The salary they mentioned was more than you make in a year doing deliveries. 3 hours later, Marcus found himself sitting in the same building where he had confronted Victoria Blackstone. But this time, he was on the 42nd floor in a waiting room that probably cost more to decorate than his entire apartment. Everything was sleek and modern, from the marble floors to the abstract art on the walls. A woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and a professional smile approached him. Mr. Williams? I'm Jessica Chen, Ms. Blackstone's executive assistant. She's ready to see you now. Marcus followed Jessica through a maze of hallways until they reached a set of double doors made of what looked like solid oak. Jessica knocked once and opened the doors to reveal the most impressive office Marcus had ever seen. The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. Victoria Blackstone sat behind a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum, and she was wearing another expensive suit, this one navy blue. Mr. Williams, she said, standing up and extending her hand. Thank you for coming. Marcus shook her hand, still not quite believing this was really happening. Ms. Blackstone, I have to admit I'm confused about why I'm here. Please, sit down. She gestured to a leather chair in front of her desk. Would you like some coffee, water? I'm fine, thank you, Marcus replied, sitting on the edge of the chair. Victoria sat back down and studied him for a moment. I suppose you're wondering why I asked you here after our encounter yesterday. The thought had crossed my mind. She smiled, and Marcus was surprised to see that it seemed genuine. Mr. Williams, in my position, I'm surrounded by people who tell me exactly what they think I want to hear. Everyone wants something from me. Money, connections, opportunities. Do you know how rare it is for someone to tell me the truth? Especially when that truth is unflattering? Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. I wasn't trying to flatter or insult you. I was just saying what I believed. Exactly. Victoria leaned forward. You stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for himself. You risked your job, your reputation, maybe even your safety for a stranger. That kind of character is something you can't buy or teach. She opened a folder on her desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. I had my team do some research on you, Mr. Williams. I hope you don't mind. Marcus felt a chill. What kind of research? Nothing invasive, I promise. Just public records, employment history, that sort of thing. Did you know that 3 years ago you missed a week of work to donate bone marrow to a child you'd never met? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. How did you find out about that? The hospital had a newsletter article about it. Anonymous donor saves 7-year-old girl's life. Victoria looked at him with something that might have been respect. The timing matched up with your employment records showing unpaid leave. I needed the money, Marcus admitted. But some things are more important than money. Yes, they are, Victoria agreed. That's something I forgot for a while. Success has a way of changing people, often not for the better. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. My father died when I was 12. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, just like you're doing now. I remember what it was like to worry about rent, to choose between groceries and utilities. Marcus was shocked by this admission. The ruthless billionaire from yesterday was showing him a side he never would have expected. I built this company with the intention of never being powerless again, Victoria continued. But somewhere along the way I became exactly the kind of person who used to intimidate my mother. Yesterday you reminded me of who I used to be and who I wanted to become. She turned back to face him. I want to offer you a job, Mr. Williams. Head of Community Outreach for Blackstone Industries. Your job would be to make sure this company gives back to the community, helps people who are struggling, makes a real difference in people's lives. Marcus felt dizzy. I don't understand. I don't have any experience in corporate work or community outreach or anything like that. You have something more valuable than experience, Victoria said. You have authenticity. You know what it's like to struggle, to worry about your child's future, to make difficult choices. That's exactly what this position needs. She named a salary that was 3 times what Marcus made from all his jobs combined. It would mean Emma could go to a better school. They could move to a safer neighborhood. He could actually save money for her college education. There's just one condition, Victoria added. Marcus's heart sank. Here was the catch. I want to meet your daughter. If I'm going to trust you to represent the heart of this company, I want to meet the person who taught you to have such a good one. Marcus spent the entire evening trying to explain to Emma that they were going to meet one of the most powerful women in Chicago, without making it sound as surreal as it actually was. Emma, being 8 years old, was more excited about the possibility of seeing the inside of a skyscraper than meeting a billionaire. Will we get to ride in one of those fast elevators, Dad? Emma asked as she brushed her teeth before bed. Tommy said his dad's office building has one that makes your ears pop. Probably. Marcus smiled, still not quite believing this was his life now. Remember what we talked about, though. Be polite, be yourself, and if you get nervous, just squeeze my hand. The next morning, Marcus dressed Emma in her best outfit, a blue dress that his mother had sent for her birthday, along with white tights and black shoes that were only slightly scuffed. He wore the one good suit he owned, the same one he had worn to job interviews and Emma's school performances. As they approached the Blackstone Industries building, Emma's eyes went wide. Dad, it's so tall I can't even see the top. The security guard at the front desk smiled when he saw them. You must be Mr. Williams and Emma. Miss Blackstone is expecting you. Take the express elevator to the 42nd floor. Emma gripped Marcus's hand tightly as the elevator shot upward, her eyes glued to the floor numbers changing rapidly. This is the coolest thing ever, she whispered. Jessica Chen met them at the elevator with the same professional smile Marcus remembered. Good morning, Mr. Williams, and you must be Emma. Ms. Blackstone is very excited to meet you. Victoria's office looked exactly the same as it had 2 days ago, but this time she wasn't sitting behind her imposing desk. Instead, she was standing by the window, and when she turned to greet them, Marcus was surprised to see she was wearing dark jeans and a simple white blouse instead of her usual business attire. Emma, Victoria said, crouching down to Emma's eye level. I'm Victoria. Your dad has told me so much about you. Emma looked up at Marcus, then back at Victoria. He told me you're really important and really rich. Victoria laughed, and it was the first time Marcus had heard her laugh. It sounded genuine and warm. Well, I suppose that's true. But do you know what I think is really important? What? Emma asked, her initial shyness beginning to fade. Having a dad who loves you enough to work 3 jobs to take care of you, that's much more important than money. Emma beamed with pride. My dad is the best dad in the whole world. He makes me pancakes every Saturday and helps me with my math homework even though he says it's harder than when he was in school. I bet he does, Victoria said, standing up. Emma, would you like to see something really cool? She led them over to the wall of windows and pressed a button Marcus hadn't noticed before. A section of the floor-to-ceiling window slid open, revealing a small balcony. Wow, Emma breathed, pressing her face against the glass door that led outside. We're so high up. 42 floors, Victoria said. Would you like to go out there for just a minute? I'll hold your hand so you don't get scared. Marcus felt his protective instincts kick in. Is it safe? Completely safe, Victoria assured him. There's a railing and I'll be with her every second. They stepped out onto the balcony and Emma's reaction was everything Victoria had hoped for. The little girl's face lit up with wonder as she looked out over the city, pointing out buildings and asking questions about what she could see in the distance. That's Navy Pier, Victoria explained, pointing toward Lake Michigan. And that tall building over there is the Willis Tower. Some people still call it the Sears Tower. My dad took me there once, Emma said. We went to the top and looked down through the glass floor, but it wasn't as high as this. Marcus watched his daughter chattering away with Victoria, and something inside his chest loosened. He had been so worried about this meeting, about whether Emma would say the right things or make a good impression. But Victoria seemed genuinely interested in what Emma had to say, asking her about school, her friends, her favorite subjects. After they came back inside, Victoria showed Emma her desk, letting her sit in the big leather chair and pretend to be the boss. Emma giggled as she spun around in the chair, and Marcus couldn't help but smile at how natural Victoria was with his daughter. Emma, Victoria said, sitting on the edge of her desk, can I ask you something? Sure. What's the nicest thing someone has ever done for you? Emma thought for a moment, her face serious with concentration. Last year, when I was sick with the flu and missed my school's Halloween party, my dad dressed up like a princess and had a tea party with me at home. He even wore makeup and everything. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Emma, that's wonderful," Victoria said, and Marcus was surprised to see her eyes were a little shiny. "What about the nicest thing you've ever done for someone else?" "Well," Emma said, "there's this boy in my class named David who doesn't have very much money. Sometimes he doesn't have lunch, so I share mine with him. My dad says it's important to help people when you can." Victoria glanced at Marcus, and he saw something in her expression that he hadn't expected. Approval, maybe even admiration. "Your dad is absolutely right," Victoria said. "Emma, would you like to see where your dad might be working?" She led them down the hall to another office, smaller than Victoria's but still impressive by Marcus's standards. It had a desk, a conference table, and a view of the city, though not as spectacular as Victoria's. "This would be your office, Mr. Williams," Victoria explained. "Head of Community Outreach reports directly to me, so you'd be working closely with my team to develop programs that help people in the community." Emma bounced on her toes excitedly. "Dad, you'd have your own office." With a window, Marcus looked around the space, trying to imagine himself working here, wearing a suit every day, making decisions that could affect thousands of people. It seemed impossible, like a dream that was too good to be true. "I have to be honest, Ms. Blackstone," he said. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for this. I've never managed programs or worked with community organizations on this scale." "You'll learn," Victoria said simply. "I have confidence in you. But more importantly, I trust you. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" As they prepared to leave, Victoria knelt down to Emma's level one more time. "Emma, I want to ask you a favor." "What kind of favor?" "I want you to help me remember something very important." "Can you do that?" "Sure. Sometimes when people have a lot of money and power, they forget that the most important thing is to be kind to other people. Your dad helped me remember that yesterday. Can you help make sure he doesn't forget it when he starts working here?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I can do that. My dad is already really good at being kind, though." "Yes, he is," Victoria agreed, standing up and extending her hand to Marcus. "So, Mr. Williams, do we have a deal?" Marcus looked at his daughter, who was practically vibrating with excitement, then at the office where he might be working, then at Victoria Blackstone, who somehow wasn't the cold, ruthless businesswoman he had first encountered. "When would I start?" he asked. "Monday, if you're ready. We have a lot of work to do." As they rode the elevator down, Emma chattered nonstop about everything she had seen. "Dad, this is going to be the best job ever. And Ms. Victoria's really nice, not scary at all." Marcus squeezed his daughter's hand, still not quite believing how dramatically his life had changed in just 3 days. He had stood up to a billionaire expecting the worst, and instead found himself with an opportunity he never could have imagined. But as they walked out of the Blackstone Industries building, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Victoria Blackstone was clearly a complex woman with secrets of her own, and he had a feeling that working for her was going to be more challenging and more rewarding than he could possibly predict. The real test would be whether he could maintain his values and his integrity in a world where money and power ruled everything. For Emma's sake and for his own, he was determined to prove that it was possible. Marcus's first day as head of community outreach at Blackstone Industries was nothing like he expected. He had imagined walking into a corporate atmosphere where he would feel out of place and overwhelmed. Instead, Victoria had assigned him a mentor, David Rodriguez, the company's director of human resources, who had grown up in a neighborhood very similar to Marcus's. "The secret to surviving in corporate America," David told him as they sat in the company cafeteria, "is remembering that beneath all the expensive suits and fancy titles, most people are just trying to do their job and go home to their families." David showed Marcus the basics of corporate life, how to navigate the computer systems, understanding the organizational chart, and most importantly, how to present ideas in a way that would get results. But Marcus's real education began when Victoria introduced him to the company's board of directors. The boardroom was intimidating, with its long mahogany table and portraits of serious-looking men who had apparently been important in the company's history. 12 people sat around the table, all of them significantly older and more experienced than Marcus. Victoria took her place at the head of the table and gestured for Marcus to sit beside her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, "I want to introduce Marcus Williams, our new head of community outreach. Marcus is going to help us develop programs that give back to the community and improve Blackstone Industries' relationship with the people of Chicago. Marcus could see skepticism on several faces around the table. A man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive watch spoke up first. Ms. Blackstone, while I appreciate the sentiment, I think we need to be careful about spending shareholders' money on charity projects that don't provide measurable returns. Mr. Henderson, Victoria replied smoothly, I'd like Marcus to share his vision for how community outreach can actually benefit our bottom line. Marcus felt his palms begin to sweat. He had prepared for this moment, but sitting in this room full of powerful people made his preparation feel inadequate. He thought about Emma, about the homeless man he had helped, about all the people he had met during his years of struggling to make ends meet. Mr. Henderson, Marcus began, surprised by how steady his voice sounded, I understand your concern about returns on investment, but I'd like you to consider this. Blackstone Industries employs over 3,000 people in the Chicago area. Many of those employees live in communities that are struggling with poverty, crime, and lack of opportunity. He stood up, feeling more confident as he continued. When we invest in those communities, we're investing in our own workforce. Better schools mean better educated potential employees. Safer neighborhoods mean our workers don't have to worry about their families while they're at work. Job training programs mean we have a larger pool of qualified candidates when we're hiring. A woman in her 40s with short red hair leaned forward. That's an interesting perspective, Mr. Williams, but how do we measure success? How do we know our money isn't being wasted? We measure it the same way we measure everything else in business, Marcus replied. We set goals, track progress, and adjust our strategies based on results. If we fund a job training program, we measure how many graduates get hired and how long they stay employed. If we support a school improvement project, we track graduation rates and test scores. For the next hour, Marcus presented ideas that he had been developing since Victoria first offered him the job. A scholarship program for children of Blackstone employees, partnerships with local organizations to provide job training in construction and manufacturing, a small business loan program to help entrepreneurs in underserved communities. By the end of the meeting, even Mr. Henderson seemed intrigued. Mr. Williams, I have to admit your proposals are more thoughtful than I expected. How quickly could you implement a pilot program? I already have 3 organizations ready to partner with us, Marcus said. We could start next month with a modest budget and see what kind of results we get. After the board members left, Victoria walked over to Marcus with a smile. That was impressive. You held your own in there. I was terrified, Marcus admitted. Good, Victoria said. The day you're not a little scared is the day you stop trying your best. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into his new role with an energy he hadn't felt in years. He visited community centers, met with nonprofit leaders, and talked to people in neighborhoods throughout Chicago. Every conversation reminded him of his own struggles and gave him new ideas for how Blackstone Industries could make a real difference. The scholarship program was the first to launch. Marcus had proposed starting with just 10 scholarships for children of company employees who wanted to attend college but couldn't afford it. The response was overwhelming. They received over 100 applications in the first week. Reading through the applications broke Marcus's heart and filled him with determination at the same time. There was Maria Santos, whose mother cleaned offices at Blackstone and who dreamed of becoming a nurse. There was James Washington, whose father worked in the mailroom and who had been accepted to engineering school but couldn't afford tuition. There was Lisa Chen, whose mother worked in accounting and who wanted to be the first person in her family to graduate from college. Marcus presented the applications to Victoria, expecting her to stick with the original plan of 10 scholarships. Instead, she surprised him again. We're funding all of them, she said after reading through the files. All of them? That's over 100 scholarships. The budget we discussed was for 10. Victoria looked up from the application she was reading. Marcus, do you remember what you said to me that first day? That having everything means you've lost the most important thing of all. Your humanity. Marcus nodded. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, Victoria continued. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What's the point of having it if I don't use it to help people? But Marcus soon learned that not everyone at Blackstone Industries shared Victoria's enthusiasm for the community outreach programs. Richard Morrison, the chief financial officer, had been with the company for 15 years and clearly resented having resources directed away from traditional profit centers. "Williams," Morrison said, cornering Marcus in the elevator one afternoon, "I hope you understand that this charity project of yours is being watched very carefully. If we don't see real results and soon, the board will shut it down." Marcus met Morrison's gaze steadily. "What kind of results are you looking for, Mr. Morrison?" "The kind that show up on our balance sheet," Morrison replied coldly. "This isn't a non-profit organization. We have shareholders to answer to." That evening, Marcus went home to find Emma working on a school project about heroes. She was cutting out pictures from magazines and gluing them onto poster board. "Who are you writing about, Princess?" Marcus asked, sitting down beside her at the kitchen table. "Ms. Victoria," Emma said proudly. "She's my hero because she's helping all those kids go to college." Marcus looked at the poster Emma was creating. She had found a business magazine with Victoria's picture on the cover and written underneath it, "Victoria Blackstone is my hero because she uses her money to help people." "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "you know Ms. Victoria is my boss, right? You don't have to write about her just because I work for her." Emma looked at him with the serious expression she got when she was trying to explain something important to adults. "Dad, I'm not writing about her because she's your boss. I'm writing about her because she's doing good things. And besides," she added with a grin, "she said I could call her Aunt Victoria now." "She said what?" "When she called earlier to ask how your first week was going, she asked if she could be my honorary aunt. I said yes because I don't have any aunts and she's really nice to me." Marcus felt a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite sort out. He was touched that Victoria cared enough to check on how he was adjusting to the job. He was pleased that she and Emma were building a relationship, but he was also a little worried about what would happen if his job at Blackstone didn't work out, or if Victoria's interest in helping people turned out to be temporary. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work to find a note on his desk from Victoria, asking him to come to her office. When he knocked on her door, she called for him to come in, and he found her standing at her window with a newspaper in her hand. "Have you seen the Tribune this morning?" she asked without turning around. Marcus's heart sank. "No, ma'am." "Is there a problem?" Victoria turned and handed him the newspaper, folded to the business section. The headline read, "Blackstone Industries launches major community investment initiative." The article described the scholarship program, the job training partnerships, and the small business loan fund that Marcus had been developing. It quoted several community leaders praising Blackstone's commitment to the city, and it mentioned Marcus by name as the architect of the programs. "This is good, right?" Marcus asked uncertainly. Victoria smiled and nodded. "It's very good. The article has generated more positive attention for Blackstone Industries than we've had in years. But that's not why I called you in here." She walked back to her desk and picked up a thick folder. "I've been getting calls all morning from other companies wanting to know how they can start similar programs. 3 different city council members have reached out asking if we'd be willing to expand our initiatives. And this," she held up the folder, "is full of applications from organizations that want to partner with us." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "I don't know if I'm ready to handle all of this. It's only been 3 weeks." "Marcus, sit down," Victoria said gently. "I want to tell you something that I've never told anyone else." Marcus sat in the chair across from her desk, noting that her usual confident demeanor seemed softer somehow. "When I was Emma's age," Victoria began, "my mother lost her job. We were evicted from our apartment and had to live in our car for 2 weeks. I remember being so embarrassed that I didn't want to go to school because I was wearing the same clothes every day and I hadn't had a proper shower." Marcus listened in stunned silence. This was not the story he expected to hear from one of Chicago's most successful business people. "There was a social worker named Mrs. Patterson who found us," Victoria continued. "She helped my mother find a new job and got us into a shelter program that helped people get back on their feet. Mrs. Patterson didn't just help us with the practical things. She made me feel like I mattered, like I had potential despite our circumstances." Victoria's voice grew quiet. "I always told myself that when I became successful, I would find a way to help other people the way Mrs. Patterson helped us. But somewhere along the way, I got so focused on building the company and proving myself that I forgot that promise." "What changed?" Marcus asked. "You did," Victoria said simply. "When you stood up for that homeless man, you reminded me of who I used to be and who I wanted to become. You showed me that success without compassion is just emptiness dressed up in expensive clothes. Before Marcus could respond, Jessica Chen knocked on the door. Ms. Blackstone, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent situation that requires your attention. Victoria frowned. What kind of situation? It's about the community outreach programs. Richard Morrison is in conference room A with several board members, and they're asking to see you immediately. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Morrison had made it clear he opposed the community programs, and if he had called an emergency board meeting, it couldn't be good news. Victoria stood up, her business demeanor returning instantly. Marcus, come with me. Whatever this is about, we'll handle it together. They walked down the hall to conference room A, where Marcus could hear raised voices before they even opened the door. Inside, Morrison sat at the head of the table with 3 board members Marcus recognized from his first presentation. Victoria, Morrison said without standing up, we need to discuss the financial implications of these community programs immediately. Good morning. Richard, Victoria replied coolly, taking a seat across from him. What exactly is the problem? Morrison opened a laptop and turned it toward Victoria and Marcus. These programs have cost us over $2 million in just 3 weeks. The scholarship fund alone is projected to cost $15 million over the next 4 years. That's money that could be invested in research and development or returned to shareholders as dividends. Mr. Henderson, the silver-haired board member who had initially been skeptical, spoke up. Victoria, we appreciate the positive publicity, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors. These expenditures are significant. Marcus felt the room closing in around him. All of his work, all of the hope he had seen in the scholarship applications, all of Emma's pride in what they were accomplishing, it was all about to disappear. Gentlemen, Victoria said, her voice steady, I understand your concerns about the budget, but I think you're missing the bigger picture. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. Richard, what was our employee turnover rate last year? Morrison looked confused by the question. 18%. Why? And what does it cost us to recruit and train a new employee? On average, about $40,000 per position. Victoria began writing numbers on the whiteboard. So our turnover cost us over $21 million last year. Now, since we announced the community programs, how many employees have submitted resignation letters? Morrison shuffled through some papers. Only 3. But that's just been 3 weeks. Exactly, Victoria said, turning back to face the group. Our turnover rate has dropped to almost 0. Our employees feel valued because we're investing in their communities and their children's futures. We're actually saving money. Marcus watched in amazement as Victoria continued building her case. She pulled up data showing increased productivity, improved customer satisfaction scores, and positive media coverage that was worth millions in advertising value. But the most important thing, Victoria concluded, is that we're doing the right thing. We're a Chicago company, built by Chicago workers, supported by Chicago customers. We have a responsibility to give back to the community that made our success possible. Henderson nodded slowly. The numbers are compelling, Victoria. But what happens if the economy turns and we need to cut costs? Then we'll make those decisions when we need to, Victoria replied. But we won't abandon our commitment to the community at the first sign of financial pressure. Morrison wasn't giving up. Victoria, with all due respect, you're letting emotions cloud your business judgment. Marcus is a nice guy with good intentions, but he doesn't have the experience to manage programs this complex. Marcus felt his face burn with humiliation. He knew Morrison was right about his lack of experience, but hearing it said so bluntly in front of everyone was crushing. Richard, Victoria said, her voice dropping to a dangerous tone, Marcus has accomplished more in 3 weeks than our previous community relations department did in 3 years. His programs are already showing measurable results, and more importantly, they're making a real difference in people's lives. She walked over and stood beside Marcus's chair. The question isn't whether Marcus has experience. The question is whether we want to be the kind of company that only cares about profit margins, or the kind that understands that our success is connected to the health of our community. The room fell silent for a long moment. Finally, Henderson spoke up. Victoria, I think we need more data before we can make a final decision about the long-term viability of these programs. What kind of data? Victoria asked. 6 months, Henderson said. Give us 6 months of results. If the programs show continued positive impact on employee retention, productivity, and community relations, we'll support expanding them. If not, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood that his job and all the programs they had started were now on probation. 6 months, Victoria agreed. But I want it clearly understood that these programs will have the full support of this company during that time. No budget cuts, no interference, no attempts to sabotage Marcus's work. She looked directly at Morrison. Is that clear, Richard? Morrison nodded reluctantly. Crystal clear. After the board members left, Victoria and Marcus sat alone in the conference room. Marcus stared at the table, trying to process what had just happened. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Maybe Morrison is right. Maybe I'm not qualified for this job. Marcus, Victoria said firmly, look at me. He raised his eyes to meet hers. Do you remember what you told me about Emma? That you'd raised a daughter who knows the difference between right and wrong? Marcus nodded. That's the only qualification that matters for this job. Everything else can be learned. But integrity, compassion, the ability to see people as human beings rather than numbers on a spreadsheet, those things can't be taught. She reached across the table and put her hand on his arm. We have 6 months to prove that doing the right thing is also good business. And I have absolute confidence that we can do it. As they walked back to their offices, Marcus felt a mixture of fear and determination. He had 6 months to prove himself. 6 months to show that community outreach could be both profitable and meaningful. The pressure was enormous, but for the first time since this incredible journey began, Marcus felt like he truly understood what he was fighting for. It wasn't just about his job anymore. It wasn't even just about the scholarships or the job training programs. It was about proving that success and compassion could coexist, that a company could be profitable while still having a soul. Emma's words from the night before echoed in his mind. Victoria Blackstone is my hero because she uses her money to help people. Now Marcus had to make sure that Emma would still be able to say that 6 months from now. 5.5 months later, Marcus stood in the same conference room where his programs had been put on trial. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. The table was covered with reports, charts, and photographs showing the impact of Blackstone Industries' community initiatives. The numbers were even better than Marcus had dared to hope. Employee turnover had dropped to just 3%, the lowest in the company's history. Productivity was up 18%. Customer satisfaction scores had reached an all-time high. The scholarship program had generated over $50 million worth of positive media coverage. And most importantly to Marcus, real lives were being changed. Maria Santos, the daughter of a Blackstone janitor, had just completed her first year of nursing school with a 3.8 GPA. James Washington was thriving in his engineering program and had already secured an internship with a major construction company. The job training programs had placed over 200 people in stable employment, with an 85% retention rate after 6 months. But the story that meant the most to Marcus was about David, the boy from Emma's class who sometimes didn't have lunch. Through the community programs, Marcus had connected David's family with resources that helped his father find better employment and his mother access job training. David's parents had written Marcus a letter thanking him for changing their family's life, not knowing that their son had been sharing Emma's lunch for months. Victoria entered the conference room looking more relaxed and confident than Marcus had seen her in months. The board members filed in behind her, including Morrison, whose expression was notably less hostile than it had been 6 months ago. Gentlemen, Victoria began, I think the results speak for themselves. Henderson nodded as he flipped through the final report. Marcus, I have to admit, when Victoria first proposed these programs, I was skeptical. But these numbers are remarkable. You've not only met every goal we set, you've exceeded them significantly. Morrison cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, Marcus. I was wrong to question your capabilities. These programs have been more successful than anyone could have predicted. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thank you, Mr. Morrison, but the real credit goes to the community organizations we've partnered with and the people who have participated in the programs. That's exactly the kind of humility that makes these programs work, Henderson said. Victoria, the board has voted unanimously to not only continue these programs but to expand them. We're approving an additional $50 million in funding for next year. After the board members left, Victoria and Marcus walked back to her office together. Through the windows, Marcus could see the city where he had grown up, where he had struggled and where he was now making a difference. "I have something for you," Victoria said, opening her desk drawer and pulling out an envelope. "It's a letter from Mrs. Patterson." Marcus looked confused. "Who's Mrs. Patterson?" "The social worker I told you about. The one who helped my family when I was Emma's age. I tracked her down a few months ago and told her about our programs. She wanted to write to you personally." Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. The letter was written in careful handwriting on simple stationery. "Dear Marcus," he read aloud, "Victoria has told me about the wonderful work you're doing at Blackstone Industries. As someone who spent 40 years trying to help families in crisis, I want you to know how much your programs mean to people like the ones I used to work with. You are giving children hope for their futures and parents the tools they need to build better lives for their families. This kind of work is more than a job, it's a calling. Thank you for answering it." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he finished reading. "She's still alive?" "She's 82 and living in a retirement community in Florida," Victoria said. "I've arranged for her to come visit next month. I thought you might like to meet her." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, guess what? Ms. Rodriguez from the school called and said David's mom got a job at the hospital because of the training program you helped start. David says his family is really happy now." Marcus showed the text to Victoria, who smiled. "That's what it's all about, isn't it? The ripple effect. We help one person, who helps another person, who helps another." 6 months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a conference about corporate social responsibility. As he stood at the podium looking out at an audience of business leaders from across the country, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. "A year ago," he began, "I was working 3 jobs trying to make ends meet as a single father. I never imagined I would be standing here talking to you about corporate responsibility. But I learned something important that day when I confronted Victoria Blackstone about her treatment of a homeless man." The audience leaned forward, interested in hearing about the famous confrontation that had been written about in business journals. "I learned that the most powerful tool any of us has is our willingness to speak up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable or scary. I learned that success without compassion is empty, and that the best business decisions are often the ones that help other people." After his speech, a young woman approached him during the reception. "Mr. Williams, my name is Sarah Chen. I work for a tech company in San Francisco, and I've been following your programs at Blackstone. I want to implement something similar at my company, but I'm not sure where to start." Marcus smiled, remembering his own uncertainty when Victoria first offered him the job. "Start with one program, one partnership, one life you can change. Everything else builds from there." As he flew back to Chicago that night, Marcus thought about how much his life had changed since that morning when he had decided to give his last $20 to a hungry stranger. Emma was thriving in her new school, excelling in her classes and making new friends. They had moved to a better neighborhood, but Marcus made sure they still volunteered at the community center where they used to rely on free meals. Victoria had become more than his boss. She had become a true friend and a mentor. More importantly, she had become the kind of leader Marcus respected, someone who used her power and resources to lift others up rather than push them down. The homeless man Marcus had helped that day had been found housing through one of their programs, and now worked part-time at a community center, helping other people who were struggling. He still remembered Marcus and would wave whenever he saw him downtown, but perhaps the most important change was in Marcus himself. He had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing the right thing despite the fear. He had learned that one person really could make a difference, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. As the plane descended toward Chicago, Marcus could see the lights of the city spread out below him. Somewhere down there was his daughter, probably asleep in her bed dreaming about her future. Somewhere down there were families whose lives had been changed by the programs he had helped create. And somewhere down there was a billionaire who had learned, just as he had, that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought with money. They had to be earned through kindness, courage, and the willingness to see other people as worthy of dignity and respect. Marcus Williams had stood up to a rude billionaire, never expecting her next move would be to transform both of their lives forever. In helping others find their way, they had both found something they didn't even know they were looking for: the true meaning of success.